In the spring of 1947, a United States Army officer named Edwin Hill sat down at Camp Detrick, Maryland, and wrote a report. The report was stamped classified. It remained that way for 46 years. Between 1937 and 1945, Imperial Japanese Army Unit 731 conducted lethal human experiments on at least 3,000 documented subjects. The facility was located at Pingfang, near Harbin, in occupied Manchuria. In 1947, the United States government granted full immunity to every officer responsible. The price was the data. Unit 731 began as a covert biological and chemical warfare research program. Its first headquarters was the Zhongma Fortress, a facility already associated with detention and forced labor. By the mid-1930s, the unit had outgrown that site. A new complex was constructed at Pingfang, covering approximately 6 square kilometers. It included laboratories, an airfield, a power plant, and a dedicated holding facility for experimental subjects. The subjects were referred to internally as Maruta. The word means logs. General Shiro Ishii commanded the unit from its founding. He was a physician. He had trained in bacteriology and held a genuine scientific curiosity about infectious disease. He had also concluded early in his career that Japan's future military power depended on biological weapons development. He understood that development required human testing. The Pingfang complex was, in part, the institutional answer to that conclusion. The documented procedures carried out at Pingfang were recorded in research papers, operational logs, and testimony gathered after the war. Subjects were deliberately infected with plague, cholera, and typhoid under controlled conditions. Researchers monitored disease progression in living bodies. They needed to know exactly how quickly organs failed, how the circulatory system responded, how long a healthy adult could survive untreated exposure. Anesthesia would have interfered with the data. It was therefore not used. Vivisection, the surgical opening of a living body, was performed on conscious subjects so that researchers could observe internal organ function in real time. Organs were removed while subjects remained alive. The procedures were documented with clinical precision. The unit operated until Soviet forces entered Manchuria in August of 1945. Ishii ordered the Pingfang facility destroyed. Documents were burned. The holding pens were emptied. Surviving subjects were killed. The physical evidence was largely eliminated before Soviet or American investigators arrived on the ground. Ishii returned to Japan. He was not arrested. He was not charged. He was interviewed. The American investigator who handled the post-war inquiry was aware of the scale of what had occurred at Pingfang. Testimony from former unit members described the procedures in detail. The question before American authorities was not whether crimes had been committed. The question was what to do with the people who had committed them. Edwin Hill's 1947 report addressed this directly. Hill assessed the experimental data transferred from Unit 731. His conclusion, written in the measured language of a government document, was that the data was absolutely invaluable. He noted that it could not have been obtained through ethical research methods. The report recommended that the data be retained. It recommended that immunity arrangements be formalized. The report remained classified until 1993. General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander of Allied powers in occupied Japan, authorized the immunity agreement. No member of Unit 731's command staff was brought before the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. The Tokyo trials proceeded for nearly 3 years. Ishii was not among the defendants. None of his senior officers appeared in that courtroom. This is where the official account becomes difficult to hold together cleanly. The Nuremberg doctors' trial, which concluded in August of 1947, established that non-consensual human experimentation constituted a war crime under international law. 20 of the 23 defendants were convicted. 7 were executed. The Nuremberg Code, drafted in the same year, set the standard that voluntary consent of human subjects is absolutely essential. Hill submitted his Camp Detrick report in the same year those proceedings closed. The United States government was simultaneously prosecuting German physicians for conducting experiments of a comparable type and negotiating immunity for Japanese physicians who had conducted experiments on a larger scale. The discrepancy was not an oversight. Internal communications from the period, declassified in the 1990s, show that American officials were aware of the parallel. They concluded that the strategic value of the biological warfare data outweighed the prosecutorial interest. The Soviet Union had captured some Unit 731 personnel and conducted its own Khabarovsk war crimes trial in December of 1949. 12 defendants were convicted. The United States dismissed the Soviet proceedings as propaganda. The men tried at Khabarovsk were lower ranking than the officers who had been granted immunity. Shiro Ishii died in Tokyo in October of 1959. The cause of death was throat cancer. He was never charged with any crime. Several of his senior colleagues went on to hold faculty positions at Japanese universities. Some held roles in public health institutions. At least one became a prominent figure in post-war Japanese medicine. Their wartime work was not, in most cases, part of their public biography. The bodies of the subjects, the Maruta, were largely unaccounted for. Some testimony suggests remains were buried on the Pingfang grounds. Chinese excavations in the 1980s and 90s recovered bone fragments from the site. The fragments were not individually identified. There were no names attached to them. The data produced at Pingfang entered American Biological Warfare Research Archives. What was done with it afterward and how it shaped subsequent American research programs has never been fully disclosed. Edwin Hill called it absolutely invaluable. Invaluable to whom and toward what end remains a question the available record does not fully answer, and the record that might answer it has not yet been released.